It sure is. Let's bring in our political analyst, Brian Sobel. Brian, tonight has huge implications. Let's start on the Republican side. If John Kasich loses his home state of Ohio and Marco Rubio loses his home state of Florida, do you think both of them will drop out?
I think, Frank, they would have no reason to stay in. If you can't win your home state, how are you supposed to win other states around the nation? I think it is a real crossroads, especially for Marco Rubio, who is not projected through polling to win Florida. Kasich, we'll have to see.
Let me ask you, Brian, what do you think about on the Democratic side? Obviously, Sanders got a really big boost in Michigan. The thinking is that if he can maybe win 3 out of the 5 states today, he might still be in play here.
Right. If he were to win in Ohio and in Illinois, as an example, Missouri, he is right in the thick of it. If Clinton, as expected, takes Florida, that's another win for her. So all in all, Heather, it's it's a matter of what happens tonight. But Bernie Sanders had that big upset in Michigan. Does he have another couple of upsets in him for tonight?
Let's go back to the Republican side. It's a very close race in Ohio. Brian, if John Kasich does win his state, what does that mean for Donald Trump?
Well, it's a winner-take-all state, so in theory, just in theory, if Trump were to win Florida, he would take all those delegates. He would not take the delegates in Ohio. It would stump the math a little bit, or stunt the math, I should say, and so he wouldn't gain as many delegates. We would move on. If he runs the board tonight, Frank, it's almost a runaway train.
Brian, it's Ken over here in the newsroom. A question about how the Republicans will handle all of these delegates as we get closer to the convention. We hear about these candidates amassing the delegates, particularly Donald Trump. But once they get to the convention, how bound are the Republican delegates to vote for that nominee that they already voted for in the primaries?
Well, the Republican rules call for what are known as bound and pledged delegates. About 95% of the delegates will be what's known as bound. That means that through the first vote at the convention, they're bound to vote for the person that they are that they've been selected to represent at the convention. After the first ballot, Ken, all bets are off, and then that's what becomes what's known as a brokered convention or an open convention. We don't have many experiences in history of that. It would be quite something to witness. But after that first ballot, it becomes sort of a free-for-all.
Brian, we talked a little bit about Marco Rubio as well as Kasich. What about Senator Ted Cruz? And if he were to win just one of these states, how crucial does he become in this? Do you still see this as virtually a two-man race between Cruz and Trump?
Well, I think Cruz wants to stick in there, and especially where he can pick up some delegates. He wants to see a knockout blow in one of those states tonight, I'm guessing, and that might be Florida. That takes Rubio out of the game. If Kasich were to lose tonight, now you're talking about a situation where it's Cruz and Trump. The problem with the math is that if Trump were to knock out both Kasich and Rubio tonight, he picks up a lot of delegates, about 30% of the delegates. That's a problem.
Who picks up the supporters of Kasich and Kasich and Rubio? If the two of them drop out, does Cruz benefit more from that, or does Donald Trump benefit more from that, even though the math certainly favors Donald Trump?
It's a really good question, Frank. I would think Cruz will pick up a lot of those votes because those were people who decided very early on not to vote for Trump. And so my guess is they would accrue to Cruz, although, boy, it's been a very interesting year along those lines.
Hey, Brian, I had a real quick question, too, about how another peculiarity of this primary day. We have Democratic voters who are voting in the Republican primary, and they're voting for different candidates to try to subvert this race. That's happening in several states, isn't it?
It is, particularly in Ohio, where you have people who are Democrats voting for John Kasich, presumably to keep Donald Trump from winning the state. So yeah, it's one of those things that goes on. I'm telling you, the rules are state by state, party by party, and it's a very hard thing to keep on top of all of the rules and procedures that attend both of these parties as they march to the conventions.
All right, Brian Sobel and Ken Wayne, thank you so much for contributing into our conversation here as we follow the results of those key primaries today.
My pleasure.